The courtroom was quiet that morning, the usual low murmur of papers and footsteps filling the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, lighting up the polished wooden benches and the judge's high bench at the front. Everyone expected the day to pass just like any other. Routine cases, familiar faces, and formal proceedings. But what happened next changed everything. A little girl no older than 10 walked into the courtroom. She was small, wearing a simple dress and a pair of worn sneakers, but there was something different about her. She held herself with a kind of confidence that caught everyone off guard. People in the courtroom paused, whispering to one another, trying to understand why a child was there. Judges and lawyers, who were used to dealing with adults, shared confused glances. The bailiff cleared his throat, unsure what to do. The girl, however, moved forward without hesitation. She carried a thick folder under her arm and held it tightly, as if it contained the most important thing in the world. Her eyes were bright, focused, and completely serious. At the front of the courtroom, the judge looked down at her, raising an eyebrow. He had seen many unusual things in his years on the bench, but this was something entirely different. "And who are you?" he asked, leaning slightly forward in his chair, curiosity laced with amusement. The girl opened her mouth and, in a clear voice, said, "I'm my dad's attorney." A stunned silence fell over the room. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some people laughed softly, others gasped. A few of the lawyers exchanged puzzled looks, unsure if they were supposed to correct the girl or let her continue. The judge, on the other hand, was quiet for a moment. He had to make a choice. Did he send this child away, or did he allow her to speak? There was something in the girl's gaze, a determination that made him pause. Something told him that she was serious. The father, sitting at the defendant's table, could hardly believe his eyes. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with nervous tension. He had gotten into a small legal dispute, nothing life-changing, but complicated enough that he needed a lawyer. His own lawyer had been delayed and wasn't present that day. Earlier that morning, in a half-joking manner, he had told his daughter, "If I ever get into trouble, you'll be my lawyer." He thought she was too young to understand anything about law, just a sweet child pretending to be grown up. But now, standing in front of the judge, she was ready to prove him wrong. The girl stepped closer to the bench, opening her folder with careful hands. Papers of different sizes spilled out, some handwritten notes, others printed from a computer. It was clear that she had spent time preparing. Her father watched, a mix of awe and disbelief washing over him. He could see the effort she had put in, the hours of studying, asking questions, and trying to understand things that even adults sometimes found confusing. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "I'm here to make sure my dad gets treated fairly. I know what the rules say and I want to help him." The judge leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He asked her how she had learned about the law. Without hesitation, she explained that she had been reading books and websites with her dad for months, learning about contracts, rules, and legal rights. She had asked questions, taken notes, and even practiced speaking in front of the mirror. Everything she said was honest and sincere, and it carried a weight that no adult could fake. The courtroom audience was captivated. People who had been scrolling on their phones waiting for the hearing to start now watched with full attention. Reporters scribbled notes, realizing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. The little girl's courage and determination created a kind of quiet excitement, a sense that they were witnessing a moment that was unusual and remarkable. The father's heart pounded in his chest. He had always known his daughter was intelligent, but he never imagined she would step into a courtroom like this. He felt a surge of pride and a little fear at the same time. Could she really help him? Was this legal at all? But before he could ask himself any more questions, the judge spoke again. "Well," he said slowly, looking down at her, "if you truly want to speak on behalf of your father, you may present your argument. But remember, the law is serious business, and you must be clear and truthful." The girl nodded earnestly, her small head held high. She took a deep breath, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Opening her folder, she began to explain the situation, pointing out details that even the lawyers in the room hadn't noticed. Her voice was confident, polite, and precise. She didn't stumble over words, and she didn't get nervous. She had done her homework. As she spoke, the audience leaned forward, listening to her every word. She had a way of breaking down complicated ideas into simple explanations, making them understandable for everyone in the room. The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally, clearly impressed. Even the opposing counsel paused, surprised at the clarity and intelligence of a child in front of the court. Time seemed to slow as she continued. She pointed out errors in the paperwork, procedural missteps, and inconsistencies in the statements she had studied. Each observation was delivered with care, demonstrating that she had not only read the materials but had also understood them. The courtroom watched, amazed, as a little girl challenged grown-up adults with logic, evidence, and courage. By the time she finished speaking, the room was completely silent. Everyone realized that this wasn't a child pretending to understand the law. This was a child who had truly prepared herself to stand up for her father. The judge smiled, shaking his head in disbelief while the father's eyes welled up with tears. He never expected this, never imagined that a simple promise to his daughter could lead to something so incredible. The girl looked up at her father, gave a small nod, and whispered, "It's okay. Dad, I've got this." He nodded back, a mixture of gratitude and astonishment on his face. The judge cleared his throat and asked her to summarize her main points again, wanting to make sure he understood everything. She did so clearly and confidently, and it became apparent that her observations were not only valid but important. Everyone in the courtroom felt a sense of disbelief and admiration. It was rare to see such courage and intelligence in someone so young. The little girl had turned a typical morning in court into an extraordinary event. People would talk about this day for years to come, sharing stories of how a 10-year-old walked into a courtroom and demanded to defend her father. For the father, this was a moment he would never forget. He realized that the love, trust, and effort he had shared with his daughter had grown into something far more powerful than he had imagined. She had taken his joking promise seriously, prepared herself with dedication, and stepped into a world most children only hear about on TV. And she had done it not for fame, not for attention, but purely to help him. As the morning moved forward, the courtroom remained focused on the little girl. Her presence changed the energy in the room, reminding everyone that courage doesn't come with age, and determination can be found in the most unexpected places. Lawyers whispered among themselves. Judges nodded in approval, and the audience watched, captivated by a story unfolding in real time. The little girl, clutching her folder, continued to stand tall, her small hands shaking only slightly from the excitement. Every word she spoke carried honesty and sincerity, a rare combination that even adults struggled to achieve in such high-pressure situations. Her father sat beside her, silently marveling at the moment, realizing that this small child had become his strongest support in the courtroom. And so, the quiet morning in the courthouse turned into a story that no one would forget. A small girl had stepped forward, claimed her role as her father's attorney, and immediately commanded respect. Her courage, intelligence, and determination left a lasting impression on everyone present, proving that sometimes the most unbelievable moments come from the most unexpected people. The day had started like any other, but it would end as a story of bravery, family bonds, and a child who dared to speak up when it mattered most. The father sat at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly together. He could feel his heart racing, and for a moment he wondered if he had made a huge mistake. Letting his young daughter take charge in a courtroom seemed almost impossible, yet here she was, standing with a courage and knowledge that defied her age. He had always known she was smart, asking questions about everything from science experiments to history. But this was different. This was real life with real consequences, and she had taken it seriously. Earlier that morning, he had been running late. His lawyer had called to say he couldn't make it, leaving him scrambling. Panic had filled his mind as he thought about trying to represent himself. That's when he remembered the promise he had made to his daughter weeks ago. It had been a light-hearted remark, something he said with a smile, telling her, "If I ever get in trouble, you can help me." He had never imagined she would take it seriously. She had nodded at him, wide-eyed and determined, and he laughed, thinking it was just a child's imagination. But she hadn't forgotten. Over the past weeks, she had sat beside him at the kitchen table, reading documents, asking about contracts, and listening to him explain the process. She had taken notes, written questions, and even tried to role-play the courtroom with stuffed animals and imaginary judges. He had smiled at first, thinking it was cute, but now, looking at her stand in front of the judge. He realized just how seriously she had prepared. The girl adjusted the papers in her folder, her small hands moving with care and precision. She looked up at her father and gave him a small nod. He nodded back, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. He could see the determination in her eyes, and it calmed him somehow. Even though he was worried about the legal process, seeing her stand there gave him hope. The judge watched quietly, allowing the little girl to continue. He had seen adults stumble over their words, falter in confidence, and sometimes even lose cases because they were unprepared. But this child, who barely reached the top of the bench, was speaking with clarity and precision. She didn't try to sound smart, and she didn't exaggerate. She simply stated the facts as she understood them, and it was clear that she had thought everything through carefully. The courtroom audience leaned forward, captivated by the scene. People who had expected a typical mundane day of legal proceedings were now watching something extraordinary. Some had phones ready, hoping to capture a moment that seemed almost unreal. Reporters whispered among themselves, trying to jot down every detail, sensing that this story would be talked about for weeks, maybe months. They could see that the girl wasn't there for attention. She genuinely wanted to help her father. The father remembered the days leading up to this moment. He had been worried about explaining legal matters to a child, fearing that she would be bored or confused. But she had been eager, asking intelligent questions and wanting to understand everything. They had spent evenings going over simple explanations of contracts, rights, and procedures. He had been surprised at how quickly she absorbed the information. She had a natural curiosity and a focus that made him realize she was different from most children her age. He had tried to test her knowledge, giving her hypothetical situations and asking what she would do. She answered carefully, thinking through each step. Sometimes she made mistakes, but she learned quickly, correcting herself without frustration. Her patience and persistence amazed him. He realized that she was not just clever, but also disciplined, qualities that would serve her well in life. And perhaps, in the courtroom that day, as the hearing progressed, she began to make observations that even seasoned lawyers might have missed. She pointed out discrepancies in the documents and noticed small errors in how the case had been presented. Her father watched, feeling a growing sense of relief. He had feared that his daughter's age would make her arguments weak or irrelevant, but instead she was making strong, valid points. He felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. His little girl, who normally asked for help tying her shoes or reaching the kitchen counter, was now his strongest ally. The opposing counsel, a serious and experienced lawyer, paused for a moment, clearly surprised. They had not expected to be challenged by a child. The lawyer exchanged glances with the judge and then with their colleagues, who were whispering among themselves. Some frowned, thinking it was unusual, while others seemed impressed. The little girl's calm, measured way of speaking made her arguments harder to dismiss. She didn't use complicated legal jargon, but she explained everything clearly, showing an understanding that went beyond her years. The father noticed the judge leaning slightly forward in his chair, paying close attention. He realized that the courtroom was no longer just about the case. It was about witnessing something extraordinary. The little girl had turned what could have been a stressful, tense day into a moment of amazement. She was commanding respect without demanding it, simply by being prepared and sincere. The father's thoughts drifted back to the night before. He had been worried about how he would explain the legal process to his daughter. He had tried to simplify everything, but she had insisted on understanding all the details. They had spent hours reading over contracts, discussing what different terms meant and practicing how to explain them. He had to admit that he underestimated her ability to learn. She was not only intelligent but also committed. She wanted to help him because she cared deeply, not because she wanted praise or attention. He could feel the tension in the courtroom start to shift. People who had been skeptical were now listening intently. Some audience members whispered to one another, impressed by the child's poise. Even the court staff, who had seen many unusual cases, seemed quietly amazed. The little girl had brought a sense of energy and focus that made the entire room more attentive. Her father felt a warm glow of pride. He had always valued education and curiosity, but seeing her apply these qualities in such a serious situation was moving. He remembered the long evenings spent helping her with schoolwork and answering endless questions. All that time, He had hoped he was making a difference, but now he could see that she had absorbed not only knowledge but also confidence and determination. She had learned how to stand up for herself and for those she cared about. The little girl paused to organize her papers and take a deep breath. She glanced at her father, who gave her an encouraging smile. She had a plan and she was ready to execute it. Every observation she made was carefully considered, and every point she raised was backed by facts she had learned. She didn't rush, didn't get flustered, and didn't let the adults around her intimidate her. Her calm presence made the courtroom take notice. The father realized that he had underestimated the power of preparation and courage. His daughter's efforts showed him that age does not determine capability. It was her dedication, her focus, and her willingness to learn that gave her the ability to stand in front of the judge and present arguments that mattered. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for her help in the legal matter, but for the lesson she was teaching him about determination, courage, and love. The judge finally spoke, asking her to clarify a few points. She responded confidently, explaining her reasoning in simple, clear terms. Each answer demonstrated that she had not only memorized information, but truly understood it. The courtroom listened silently, impressed by the clarity of her thought and the honesty of her words. Even the opposing lawyer could not help but nod at some of her observations, realizing that she had insight they had overlooked. As the morning turned into afternoon, it became clear that the little girl's preparation was paying off. The judge asked questions and she responded with calm, thoughtful answers. The father watched in awe, realizing that his daughter had become the center of attention for all the right reasons. She had not only helped him, but also shown everyone in the courtroom the power of determination and hard work. At one point, she paused to explain a complex detail in a way that everyone could understand. Her father felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by pride. He had watched her grow up, help with homework, and learn about the world, but this moment surpassed anything he had imagined. She was not just his daughter. She had become his advocate, his voice and his protector in a situation that could have been intimidating for anyone. The courtroom remained captivated. People who had been skeptical at first were now fully engaged, leaning forward in their seats to catch every word. The little girl's courage had created an atmosphere of respect and admiration. She was small in stature but enormous in impact. She had taken a situation that could have been stressful and turned it into an unforgettable lesson about preparation, courage, and the strength of family bonds. By the time the hearing reached a short recess, the father felt a mixture of relief and pride. He had been worried, uncertain about how his daughter would handle such a serious situation, but she had exceeded every expectation. She had taken what started as a playful promise and turned it into a real, meaningful effort to help him. And in doing so, she had taught him a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest power when backed by love, preparation, and determination. As the father looked at his daughter, he knew that this moment would stay with him forever. He had witnessed something rare and extraordinary, a child stepping up in a way that was both intelligent and heartfelt, showing that courage and dedication are not determined by age. And as the courtroom slowly returned to its routine, everyone there carried with them the memory of a little girl who had refused to be underestimated, who had spoken with clarity, and who had shown the world that sometimes the most unexpected people can make the biggest difference. The courtroom was filled with a quiet tension as the little girl gathered her papers and prepared to speak again. Her father sat beside her, holding his breath, nervous but full of hope. He had watched her already impress the judge and the audience with her knowledge, but now it was time for her to present her full argument. The room was still, the air heavy with curiosity and anticipation. The girl straightened her back, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Her voice was calm, confident, and clear. She didn't rush, and she didn't stumble over her words. She started with a brief summary of the case, explaining the situation in a way that everyone in the room could understand. She pointed out the key issues and highlighted what she believed were mistakes in the opposing side's claims. Every word she spoke was carefully chosen, simple yet precise, showing that she truly understood what she was talking about. Her father looked at her with a mix of pride and awe. He had never imagined that she could handle such a serious matter. Yet here she was, commanding the attention of everyone in the courtroom. He remembered all the evenings they had spent together going over documents, discussing rules and practicing her explanations. It was clear that her preparation was paying off and her dedication was shining through. The judge listened carefully, leaning forward slightly, clearly impressed. He had seen many adults stumble through cases, but this child spoke with clarity and conviction. She was polite, respectful, and focused, qualities that made her hard to ignore. The judge could see that she was not just reading from papers. She understood the situation and was able to explain it in her own words. Her reasoning was logical and her observations were sharp, pointing out details that even some lawyers might overlook. The audience in the courtroom was captivated. People who had been skeptical at first were now fully engaged. They leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear every point she made. Some whispered to each other in disbelief, marveling at her ability to stand up in such a serious environment and present arguments that made sense. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, realizing that they were witnessing a story worth telling. The little girl had turned a routine legal proceeding into something extraordinary. The father's heart was pounding. He had always known his daughter was smart and determined, but he had never expected her to rise to this challenge. Seeing her stand there, speaking with confidence and clarity, filled him with pride and relief. He knew she was making a real difference, and he felt an overwhelming gratitude for her willingness to help him. The little girl continued to explain her points, carefully highlighting each issue. She addressed discrepancies in the documents and procedural errors she had identified. She spoke slowly and clearly, making sure that everyone could follow her reasoning. She didn't try to sound like a professional lawyer. She spoke in a way that was natural and sincere, which made her arguments even more compelling. The opposing lawyers shifted uncomfortably in their seat. They had not expected to face a child who was so prepared and articulate. They whispered to a colleague, clearly surprised by the depth of her understanding. Some of her points were difficult to counter, and even the adults in the room had to admit that she had noticed things that were easy to overlook. Her presence in the courtroom had changed the dynamic entirely. The judge interrupted briefly to ask her a question. He wanted to know how she had learned so much about the law, and whether she understood the implications of what she was saying. The girl looked at him confidently and explained that she had spent weeks preparing, studying with her father, and practicing her arguments. She had read books, looked at examples, and asked questions until she fully understood the situation. Her honesty and clarity impressed the judge, and he nodded, indicating that she could continue. She took a moment to organize her papers and then proceeded to address the main points of the case. Her explanation was methodical, step by step, highlighting each mistake and misunderstanding. She used simple language, but her points were sharp and effective. Everyone in the room could follow her reasoning, and it became clear that her observations were not only correct but crucial to understanding the case. Her father watched her closely, feeling a mixture of pride and amazement. He had spent years trying to teach her important lessons about life, responsibility, and perseverance, but he had never imagined that these lessons would be applied in a courtroom. Seeing her put everything she had learned into practice was both humbling and inspiring. He realized that she was not only helping him, she was also showing everyone in the room the value of preparation, intelligence, and courage. The courtroom was completely silent, all eyes on the little girl. She continued to speak with clarity and confidence, addressing every point carefully. She didn't let the seriousness of the courtroom intimidate her, and she didn't let the adults around her distract her. Her focus was remarkable, and it made her arguments even more powerful. The judge listened intently, clearly taking her observations seriously, while the audience remained captivated by her performance. The little girl paused for a moment to make sure she had made her points clearly. She glanced at her father, who gave her an encouraging nod. She smiled slightly, feeling reassured, and continued to explain the final parts of her argument. She pointed out the most important details, summarizing the situation in a way that made sense to everyone. Her argument was complete, thoughtful, and persuasive, showing that she had not only prepared but truly understood the case. The opposing lawyer tried to respond, but the little girl's points were well-structured and difficult to counter. Her observations were factual and logical, leaving little room for dispute. She remained calm and respectful, never raising her voice or losing her composure. Her ability to stay focused and present her argument clearly impressed even the most experienced adults in the courtroom. The father felt a sense of relief and pride wash over him. He had worried that his daughter might be overwhelmed or nervous, but she had handled the situation with maturity and intelligence. He realized that her preparation, determination, and love for him had made all the difference. She had taken a simple promise seriously and turned it into a powerful effort to help him. It was a moment he would never forget. The judge nodded thoughtfully, clearly impressed by the little girl's performance. He asked her to clarify a few minor points, and she responded confidently, providing clear explanations. Her ability to think on her feet and respond to questions without hesitation further demonstrated her understanding and preparation. Everyone in the courtroom could see that she was not just repeating memorized information. She truly understood the situation and was able to communicate it effectively. The audience watched in awe as the little girl continued to present her case. Her confidence, intelligence, and sincerity had captured everyone's attention. People whispered to each other, amazed that someone so young could speak so clearly and persuasively. Reporters took notes, knowing they were witnessing a story that would be shared far and wide. The little girl had turned a routine legal proceeding into an unforgettable moment. The father's thoughts returned to the nights they had spent preparing together. He remembered her questions, her persistence, and her determination to understand every detail. He realized that all that effort had paid off in the most extraordinary way. She had become his advocate, his voice in the courtroom, and a reminder that courage and dedication are not determined by age. As the hearing continued, the little girl wrapped up her argument, summarizing the key points once more. Her father watched her, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. She had taken a situation that could have been intimidating and turned it into an opportunity to demonstrate her intelligence, courage, and love. The courtroom remained silent, all eyes on her, fully aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary. For the father, this moment would stay with him forever. He had watched his daughter grow, help with schoolwork, and learn about life. But this experience had shown him a side of her he had never seen before. She was brave, determined, and capable, able to face challenges that most adults would find difficult. Her performance in the courtroom was a testament to her character and the bond they shared. As the little girl finished speaking, the judge smiled and nodded. He had listened carefully, taking in every point she had made. It was clear that her observations were thoughtful, accurate, and important. The courtroom remained quiet for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. Everyone present knew that they had witnessed something remarkable, a rare example of a child stepping up with intelligence, courage, and determination. The father looked at his daughter with a deep sense of admiration. He realized that this experience had taught him as much as it had taught her. He had seen the power of preparation, the importance of dedication, and the incredible impact of love and support. His daughter had not only helped him in a legal matter, she had shown everyone in the room that courage, intelligence, and determination can come from the most unexpected places. As the courtroom settled, the father felt a wave of gratitude and pride. He knew that this day would be remembered not just for the outcome of the case, but for the extraordinary courage of his daughter. She had taken a promise seriously, prepared diligently, and stood in front of a judge and an audience with confidence and clarity. Her efforts had made a real difference, and her performance had left a lasting impression on everyone present. The little girl, small but powerful in presence, had turned an ordinary courtroom into a place where courage and determination shone brightly. Her father, the judge, the lawyers, and the audience had all witnessed a moment that would stay with them forever. She had shown that even the youngest among us can make a difference, and that love, preparation, and courage can create the most unforgettable outcomes. The courtroom, once quiet and routine, had been transformed into a stage for an extraordinary story of bravery, intelligence, and heart. The courtroom was tense, yet charged with a strange excitement as the little girl continued to speak. She had already captured everyone's attention, and now it was time for the most critical part of her argument. Her father sat beside her, gripping his chair with nervous hands, but he couldn't help the swelling pride he felt inside. He had always known she was smart and determined, but what she had shown in the courtroom surpassed anything he could have imagined. The judge watched her closely, leaning forward in his seat. He had seen many cases over the years, some simple, some complicated, and some unusual, but nothing compared to this. A child, barely 10 years old, standing in a courtroom with a calm confidence that rivaled experienced lawyers. He could see the truth in her words and the sincerity in her expressions. She wasn't there to play a game. She was there to make a difference, and she was doing it with honesty and clarity. She opened her folder once more and carefully arranged her notes. Each page had been meticulously prepared, and every detail had a purpose. She took a deep breath and began to speak, explaining her final points. Her voice was steady and strong, carrying over the quiet murmurs of the audience. She spoke slowly, deliberately, ensuring that every word was understood. She highlighted the inconsistencies she had found, the procedural mistakes that could affect the case, and the key facts that everyone needed to consider. Her father watched, completely absorbed. He had spent weeks helping her understand the law in simple terms, explaining contracts, procedures, and the importance of details. She had listened carefully, asked questions, and practiced repeatedly. Now, in the courtroom, all of that preparation was paying off in a way he could never have imagined. She wasn't just repeating information. She was thinking critically and presenting her own insights. The courtroom audience was silent, captivated by the scene. People who had initially thought it was a cute or humorous moment were now fully engaged, leaning forward to hear every word. Some were whispering to each other, unable to believe the clarity and intelligence of a child speaking in such a serious environment. Reporters scribbled notes, realizing they were witnessing a story worth telling. The little girl had turned a normal day in court into something remarkable. The opposing lawyer shifted in their seat, clearly unsettled by the little girl's confident presentation. They had expected a simple routine case, and instead, they were confronted with a child who had done her homework and could articulate points they hadn't anticipated. They whispered to a colleague, their eyebrows furrowed, realizing that they would need to respond carefully. Every point she made was valid, and dismissing them would not be easy. The judge asked her to clarify a few of her observations, wanting to make sure he understood them correctly. The little girl responded calmly, explaining each point with precision and thoughtfulness. She didn't falter under the questioning. Instead, she used it as an opportunity to reinforce her arguments. Her ability to remain composed and articulate under pressure impressed everyone in the courtroom. Her father's heart swelled with pride. He had always tried to instill values of hard work, perseverance, and curiosity in his daughter. But seeing her apply them in such a critical situation was more than he could have imagined. He realized that she had not only absorbed the knowledge but had also internalized the confidence to use it effectively. She was standing up for him, showing courage and intelligence far beyond her years. The little girl continued, carefully walking through the evidence and pointing out the discrepancies that mattered most. She didn't rush and she didn't exaggerate. Every statement was backed by facts she had studied and understood. The judge nodded occasionally, clearly impressed, while the courtroom remained silent, listening intently. Her clarity and sincerity had a way of making complex issues easy to understand for everyone present. The opposing lawyer tried to interrupt, but the little girl politely acknowledged them and explained her points further. Her respect and poise made it difficult for anyone to dismiss her. She wasn't confrontational. She was simply determined to make sure that her father received a fair chance. Her confidence and clarity left a strong impression, even on those who were skeptical at first. Her father looked at her, unable to contain his emotions. He felt pride, relief, and gratitude all at once. She had taken a simple promise seriously, dedicating time, energy, and focus to help him. He had worried that she might be overwhelmed or intimidated, but she had shown a remarkable strength of character. She had taken what could have been a stressful situation and turned it into a display of courage, intelligence, and determination. The courtroom remained captivated as she continued to explain the final elements of her argument. She summarized the key points, emphasizing the most important details and the observations that mattered most. Her voice remained steady, her posture confident, and her expression calm. Everyone could see that she had prepared thoroughly and understood what she was saying. She was not just a child speaking in court. She was a powerful advocate for her father. The judge leaned back, clearly impressed, and asked her to repeat a few crucial points for clarity. She did so without hesitation, her responses clear and concise. She had anticipated the questions and was ready to provide explanations that were both logical and easy to follow. Her preparation and thoughtfulness shone through every word. The father felt a wave of relief. He had been anxious about the outcome, worried that his daughter might struggle or that the case could be jeopardized. But she had handled everything with grace, intelligence, and honesty. He realized that her presence had changed the energy in the courtroom. Her courage and preparation had commanded attention and respect, making it clear that she was not to be underestimated. The audience remained engaged, whispering to one another in admiration. People who had initially doubted her ability were now witnesses to something extraordinary. They were seeing a child demonstrate focus, intelligence, and courage in a real-life situation that mattered. Reporters continued to take notes, knowing this was a story that would inspire and amaze others. The little girl glanced at her father, giving him a small, reassuring smile. He nodded back, filled with pride and emotion. He knew that she had done everything she could to help him, and that her efforts would be remembered. The judge acknowledged her thoroughness and attention to detail, clearly impressed by her understanding and the quality of her observations. The courtroom had shifted from a place of routine procedure to a scene of admiration and respect. The little girl had transformed the environment with her preparation, courage, and sincerity. Her presence had made everyone realize that age does not define capability, and that determination and preparation can overcome many obstacles. Her father could see that she had not only helped him, but had also set an example for everyone in the room. As the hearing approached a pause, the little girl finished her argument and organized her papers. She had presented her case thoughtfully, carefully, and confidently. Everyone in the courtroom could see the effort she had put in and the seriousness with which she approached the situation. Her performance had left a lasting impression on the judge, the lawyers, and the audience. The father felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had always believed in his daughter, but seeing her rise to this challenge in such an extraordinary way had exceeded all expectations. He realized that she had taught him a lesson as well, that courage, preparation, and sincerity are more powerful than any experience or age. She had stepped up when it mattered most, proving that determination and love can create remarkable outcomes. The judge paused for a moment, considering everything she had said. He nodded, acknowledging her clarity and insight, and thanked her for her effort and thoughtfulness. The courtroom remained silent, absorbing the significance of what had just occurred. Everyone knew that they had witnessed something rare and unforgettable. A child standing confidently in a courtroom and making a difference through intelligence, preparation, and sincerity. Her father looked at her, filled with pride and awe. He realized that this experience would remain with him forever. She had turned a stressful, uncertain situation into a display of courage and capability that inspired everyone present. She had shown that even the smallest voices can carry the greatest impact when backed by love, determination, and preparation. The little girl, small in size but immense in presence, had transformed the courtroom that day. Her clarity, focus, and sincerity had left a lasting impression on everyone. She had demonstrated that courage and intelligence are not measured by age, and that determination and preparation can overcome many challenges. The father knew that this day would be remembered not only for the outcome of the case, but also for the extraordinary efforts of his daughter, who had stood by him with unwavering dedication and heart. The courtroom had settled into a quiet anticipation as the little girl prepared for the final moments of the hearing. She had already impressed everyone with her knowledge, courage, and clarity, but now it was time for the outcome. Her father sat beside her, nervous but hopeful, holding on to the folder she had so carefully prepared. The judge leaned back in his chair, reviewing the notes and documents while observing the small girl who had transformed the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. She straightened her back and took a deep breath. She had one last chance to summarize her points and make sure the judge understood the full picture. Her small hands were steady, her voice calm, and her expression focused. The audience watched intently, whispering in quiet awe as if they could feel the significance of what was about to happen. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, sensing that they were witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime story. The little girl began to speak, summarizing the key points she had made earlier. She explained the discrepancies in the documents, the procedural mistakes, and the evidence that supported her father's case. She spoke clearly, avoiding complicated legal jargon, making sure that everyone in the courtroom could understand the situation. Her voice carried both confidence and sincerity, showing that she genuinely cared about ensuring fairness for her father. Her father watched her closely, feeling a mix of pride, relief, and gratitude. He had spent weeks helping her understand the basics of law, teaching her about contracts, rights, and procedures. He had always hoped she would learn and grow from the experience, but he had never imagined that she would take it so seriously and present herself in such a confident, intelligent way. Seeing her now, he knew that all the time they had spent together had prepared her for this moment. The judge listened attentively, clearly impressed by the little girl's preparation and understanding. He had seen many adults stumble through cases, but this child spoke with clarity, precision, and honesty. Every point she made was relevant, every observation carefully considered. The judge could see that she was not simply reading from a script. She understood the case and could explain it in her own words. Her ability to convey complex ideas in a simple, understandable way made her arguments powerful and persuasive. The opposing lawyer sat quietly, taking notes and listening carefully. They had not expected to face a child who was so well prepared and articulate. Some of the points she raised were difficult to dispute, and even the adults in the courtroom could see the logic in her reasoning. She spoke respectfully, without arrogance or confrontation, making it clear that her intention was to help her father, not to challenge the authority of the court. Her father felt a lump in his throat as he watched her. He realized that she had grown not just in knowledge but in courage and determination. She had taken a promise seriously, dedicated herself to preparation, and stood in front of a room full of adults with unwavering confidence. He had always been proud of her, but now he felt a profound sense of admiration and gratitude. She had become his advocate, his voice, and his protector. The little girl continued, carefully emphasizing the most important points. She spoke methodically, step by step, making sure that the judge and everyone in the courtroom understood the significance of each detail. Her calm presence and focused delivery commanded respect and attention. The judge nodded occasionally, clearly taking in her observations while the audience remained captivated by her performance. She paused for a moment to glance at her father. He gave her an encouraging nod and she smiled slightly, feeling reassured. She had prepared for this moment, and she knew that her efforts were not only helping her father, but also demonstrating the value of courage, preparation, and perseverance. Her words carried a weight that no adult could fake, and everyone in the courtroom could sense her sincerity. As she finished her final points, the judge leaned forward, considering everything she had said. He asked a few clarifying questions, and the little girl responded confidently, providing clear, thoughtful answers. Her ability to respond under pressure without hesitation further impressed everyone in the courtroom. It was clear that she had internalized the information, understood the case deeply, and could communicate it effectively. The father felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been anxious about how his daughter would handle such a serious situation, but she had exceeded every expectation. He realized that her courage, intelligence, and preparation had made a real difference. She had taken what could have been a stressful and intimidating experience and turned it into a demonstration of focus, determination, and heart. The judge paused, reviewing the documents and the girl's explanations. He looked at her with a warm, approving smile. "You have done an impressive job explaining these points," he said. "It is clear that you have studied carefully and understand the situation well." The courtroom audience murmured softly, acknowledging the unusual and remarkable scene. People who had doubted her at first were now fully engaged, watching a child demonstrate poise, intelligence, and courage in a real-life situation. Reporters continued to jot down notes, realizing they were witnessing a story that would inspire many. The opposing lawyer nodded in acknowledgement. They could not deny the clarity of her observations or the thoroughness of her preparation. While the case still had to follow legal procedures, it was evident that her contributions had made a significant impact. The little girl's calm confidence and well-thought-out arguments had changed the atmosphere in the courtroom, earning respect from all sides. Her father looked at her, filled with pride and emotion. He realized that this experience had taught him as much as it had taught her. He had witnessed the power of preparation, the importance of dedication, and the incredible impact of love and support. She had shown that courage and intelligence are not measured by age, and that determination can overcome obstacles that might seem insurmountable. The little girl remained composed as the judge began to make his final remarks. He thanked her for her thoughtful and detailed explanations and acknowledged the effort she had put into preparing. He also noted that her observations had highlighted important details that needed to be considered in the case. The courtroom listened intently, recognizing the significance of her contributions. Her father felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had always believed in his daughter, but seeing her rise to this challenge and perform with such confidence, intelligence, and heart was more than he could have imagined. He realized that she had not only helped him, but had also set an example for everyone in the courtroom. Her actions demonstrated that determination, preparation, and sincerity could make a powerful impact, no matter how young someone might be. As the judge prepared to give the final ruling, the little girl held her father's hand gently. He squeezed it back, feeling a sense of gratitude and pride that words could not express. The judge addressed the room, acknowledging the points that had been made and considering the arguments carefully. When he finally delivered his decision, it was clear that the little girl's efforts had played a significant role in shaping the outcome. The father felt a mix of relief and joy. The decision had gone in his favor, thanks in part to the careful observations and arguments presented by his daughter. The courtroom erupted in quiet applause, acknowledging the remarkable courage and intelligence of the young girl who had stood up for her father. People were smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes as they realized they had witnessed something extraordinary. The little girl looked up at her father, her eyes shining with pride and happiness. He hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by emotion. He knew that this moment would stay with him forever. She had taken a simple promise seriously, dedicated herself to preparation, and faced a real challenge with courage and determination. In doing so, she had created a memory that would never be forgotten.